Welcome, everyone. My name is Ryan Susky. I'm Director of Programs over at the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education, and I'll be the facilitator here today for Unit 4 of the We the People National Invitational for South Seminole Academy in Florida. In just a moment, I'm going to have the judges introduce themselves, followed, of course, by the students introducing themselves before we begin the hearing. The hearing process today will be a 4-minute prepared statement from the students, followed by 8 minutes of follow-up questions from the judges. Now, during the hearing, my microphone will be muted, but I will be holding up time cards. For that reason, I do recommend that you go ahead and put your computer on gallery view so that you see my time cards, and of course, you can see your colleagues as well. At the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will give some brief feedback to the teams, and then we'll be on our way. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to your chairperson to begin the introductions.
Good afternoon, South Seminole. It's really nice to see you again. I'm Diana Owen. I'm Professor of Political Science at Georgetown University.
Hello, I'm Deshawn Whitaker, We the People teacher in Charles County Public Schools in Maryland.
And I'm Joe Stewart, and I teach political science at Clemson University in South Carolina.
And if you would go ahead and introduce yourselves and your teachers, that would be great.
Hello, I am Nicholas Rahman, representative from South Seminole Academy, Unit 4.
Hello, I'm Ian Gustanis, representative of South Seminole Academy, Unit 4.
Hello, I'm Malachi Blanchard, representative of South Seminole Academy, Unit 4, and today we have with us our teacher, Mr. Don Witz.
Great.
Great, thank you. So I think it comes as no surprise that the question for today is number 2. If a law has been properly passed by the lawmaking branches of a democratic government, why should judges have the power to declare it unconstitutional? Do you agree or disagree with Robert Dahl? Why? What is judicial review and why is it controversial? What has been the impact of judicial review on American society? Once the Supreme Court has decided that a law is unconstitutional, what power, if any, do the people have to change the Constitution? Please begin.
Judicial review is the keystone and main center power of the judicial branch, as well as an important factor in protecting the rights of the people. Judicial review is the power of the judicial branch to decipher whether or not a law is within constitutional guidelines and was established in the Supreme Court in Roe versus Madison in 1801. Judicial review has been used heavily throughout the years, and it becomes more and more important every day.
We adamantly disagree with Robert Dahl's statement. To begin, Robert Dahl is wrong about the judge's ability to declare laws unconstitutional. This rule of lawmaking comes from a while back when the United States government was established by the Founding Fathers. When the judicial branch was established, they ran and declared laws from a writ mandamus until the court case Marbury versus Madison, which Madison won. This caused the writ mandamus to become outdated and judicial review was established. This power was created to protect the rights of the people. If a corrupt law was passed by the legislative that could affect the people negatively, then the judicial could shoot it down. It is quite literally impossible to overturn a judicial ruling. However, judges must only stick to constitutional guidelines, therefore an amendable government prevents any abuses of power. Many corrupt politicians from the legislative could affect the lawmaking process on both federal and state levels because they can persuade the people, be able to have the law only benefit them, and disproportionately affect certain people. One such case is Hall versus Florida, which violated the both 8th Amendment cruel and unusual punishment clause because I had to take an IQ test to decide their outcome, which was unusual and cruel for the prisoners, and the 14th Amendment that establishes that all people are equal under the law.
Judicial review has sparked much controversy throughout the years, even since its creation. Judicial review, as stated earlier, is the judicial power to declare laws and actions by federal and state governments unconstitutional. The controversy comes with the amount of power that judicial review gives to the branch. An amendable government prevents abuses of power on judges' behalf. Judicial review has gone against public opinion several times, but in the end, has helped put societal changes like protecting and establishing a sense of equality and protecting the rights of the citizens. One such example is Brown versus Board of Education, which made the rule separate but equal illegal in all states and led to a path of desegregation between white and colored communities. Some others include Tinker versus Des Moines, which allowed students to have certain freedoms of speech while at school, and Roper versus Simmons that deems the death penalty as cruel and unusual when used on minors. The last example is Hodges versus Albertsville. This court case was one of the most controversial due to the high number of states that had laws in place opposing the ruling. The case made it so that same-sex marriages receive the same rights as typical heterosexual marriages. While many hold these rulings into this favor still to this day, it is a large example of why we have judicial review. isn't a tool to favor opinions, but a tool to preserve and protect the meaning of the Constitution.
Once the Supreme Court has declared a law unconstitutional, the people do have some power to change the Constitution. People's powers to change the Constitution mainly derive from the First Amendment of the Constitution using social pressure. One of these powers is protesting using freedom of speech and petition. If a large amount of people disagree with a law that is passed or declared unconstitutional, they can make their opinion known by protesting peacefully. The only caveat to this right is if they don't protest peacefully, then government forces can be taken, such as police or military interference. A second way that people can change the Constitution is that they can vote in a representative into state or federal legislative, or they themselves can run for a spot in government. If they ran for government, they could directly affect the amendment process through voting in Congress. In the end, people have more of an indirect effect on the Constitution, but they still do have the power in that aspect.
All in all, knowing that judicial review is the final say in the lawmaking process, and because of this, it can be very polarizing. Without judicial review, the people's rights would have no protection under the Constitution, and makes it one of the most important powers in government.
Thank you for listening. We're now open for questioning.
Thanks very much. I'd like to go back to kind of the beginning of your prepared remarks and ask you a little bit more about Marbury versus Madison. Could you talk a little bit more about the case and the reasons that Chief Justice John Marshall used to justify the establishment of judicial review?
So, as you said, Chief Justice, he basically, when the court case was taken to him, the judicial branch really didn't know if it was their case to take part of, because it was confusing on both state, federal levels. It was just kind of, a writ of mandamus was basically them saying, we need to take this to the Supreme Court. And it was kind of like the Supreme Court, they didn't know what to do. And so he was like, okay, well, they have it set aside so that we have certain powers. And he felt that that was one of the powers that the judicial branch should have to declare something unconstitutional. And, since then, the judicial branch has gone by that ruling of, declaring laws unconstitutional.
I agree with my colleagues and I feel like he has summed it up.
All right. How do you feel about the argument that judicial review is necessary to protect the rights of the minorities against the will of the majority?
Go ahead, Ian.
I feel that judicial review is very important to protect the minorities because it is not biased. It is more bipartisan because they use the Constitution and they only go by the Constitution to make sure that the people's rights are protected through what is in the Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights.
I agree with my colleagues because they say that when the judicial, how it protects the rights of the people, as he stated, it does go by the Constitution, meaning that the Constitution, whatever it says, that is how they would interpret if a law was passed and some people don't agree with it and it is unconstitutional, then that is what judicial review is used for, to protect the rights of the people.
I definitely agree with both of my colleagues. And as I said before, with Hodges versus Albertsville, 17 states still had laws that prohibited homosexual marriages. And even with Brown versus Board of Education, half of the states did have separate but equal laws, especially in the South. And so as we see, judicial review kind of strikes these things down, makes it so that, minorities are protected from a majority.
Okay, let's talk about, you've made the point, and I think you've reinforced it here, that one of the functions of judicial review is to protect the meaning of the Constitution. What does it mean if the court at one point declares one thing and then changes its mind later? The court says in Plessy versus Ferguson that racial segregation does not violate equal protection. It says in Brown versus Board of Education that it does. How does this fit in with your idea of how judicial review ought to work or does work?
Well, the Constitution is a living document. So as time goes on, it changes and there's different amendments that are put in. So therefore, decisions that were made in the past are no longer valid.
I definitely agree. I definitely agree with my colleague, as he said, over time, the Constitution changes because the people change. We've had so many things go on in between that time, different political parties, different political viewpoints, different political issues come about over time. And so, when Plessy versus Ferguson was established, it was different from when Brown versus Board of Education was brought up to the courts. And over time, as we see, judges, they change their mind. They're different judges. There are, different people who run the country at different times. And as he said, it was a living document. So it's going to change, and their interpretation of it is going to change with times.
Do you think that the Supreme Court justices should be elected by the people, or do you think that the system we have now, where they're appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, is working?
So I feel that the system that we are working in right now is still working, because when the judges are elected by the president, they still do have, even though it is not direct, they still have an indirect say by choosing like who the president is, and then that decides who the judges is. So they still do have a say in the government by showing who the judges are.
I agree with my colleague in that the congressmen and women are elected by the people as well as the president, so they don't have a direct effect on who the judge is, but they have an indirect effect through who they are electing into office.
I definitely agree with both of my colleagues. And just something to add, there is a reason that the founders put an electoral college in place. And that is the same reason that they have, where judges are picked by the executive branch, because, the people, they don't always know what they're going to talk about. They don't always know what's best. Like congressmen, they've been doing it forever. They know what laws are. They know all that kind of stuff. I don't think the people have as much knowledge about what the judicial branch does. And, that's just how it is. So it's better that we have congressmen and congresswomen worry about the kind of stuff than we have the people, make decisions on stuff they may not know about.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about justices. How do you feel about their life-term appointment?
I definitely do think that there should be some sort of limitation on the life-term appointment, because, as we said earlier, different judges might, as time goes on, change something. And it's kind of like if this judge was here since he was like 25 years old and he still has his same, beliefs until he's 100 and he stays alive. I mean, nothing's going to change, and that may be an issue. But that's the reason there are, different kinds of checks and balances we have in place, such as impeachments. I don't know. I really don't see an issue with the judge serving a life term, but we have the president who only serves 4 terms at a time, and we have congressmen who serve 6 terms at a time. So I do think there should be some sort of limitation, but I mean, it really doesn't matter to me.
I agree with my colleague that there should be a little bit more of a limitation other than good moral character, but I feel he summed it up pretty well.
So you would not be, right now judges are the only federal officials for which there is no constitutional requirement. Each one of you right now is qualified to be a federal judge. Do you think you're interested in that? I can tell. If you should we put some limitations, age, whatever, on who could be a federal judge?
So
Yeah,
I feel that we should have a limitation on who the judges, like how we should limit them by, like, just like with the president, how a president cannot run unless he's like 35 or older. So that is.
Yeah, you get the final word there, Nicholas. Thank you. Time's up. Great.
Well, thanks so much. And now the judges will give you some comments, and I'll start by saying how much I enjoyed your opening presentation. I thought you did a really good job of stating your position in light of the question. You disagreed with Dahl, and then you provided good evidence throughout your prepared remarks about why you disagreed with his position. I thought that you showed a strong knowledge of Supreme Court cases that you used as evidence throughout to make specific points. You often brought it back to parts of the Constitution, the First Amendment, and other things, which I thought was really important. I think a theme that came through throughout your entire presentation, including the introductory, your opening statement, and the Q&A, is about the responsiveness to changes in society, and how, it's important that we have some level of stability, but at the same time that there's adaptability. And that came through in a number of the questions that you addressed throughout. I thought it was good that you brought up some of the political factors that could come into play and could influence the court in some ways, and that you've kind of favored the way that the court is selected now, because you think it kind of safeguards against it. And something that you brought up that I thought was very important was the idea that, most citizens are not as informed as you are, and don't know, a lot about politics, or, kind of the process. And so if we opened up the judiciary to elections, that there could be people who don't have a lot of information that would be making the decisions. So you feel that it's best that people who do have that kind of more informed background. And you linked that to the Electoral College, which I thought was interesting as another kind of a safeguard. So all in all, I thought you did a really great job, and I enjoyed the discussion today. Thank you.
Yes, I agree with everything my colleague said. I enjoy that you understand what a writ of mandamus was, and you were able to explain that in a very thorough way and link it back to the principle of judicial review. I appreciated that. I like how you thought about, again, the political implications to this if we had people electing Supreme Court justices. I'd like to talk a little more about the term limits. We kind of got different opinions there. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so we couldn't explore that a bit further, even though you don't agree with necessarily them serving a specific number of years. I'm interested in what you think the qualification should be, since they would be on there for life according to your thoughts. But overall, you did an excellent job today, and I really enjoy speaking with you.
Yeah, the third judge gets to agree with his colleagues, and I do. I'm going to just limit myself to 4 things that I thought were very impressive, or 3, and then a comment. First, when we ask about how could the public make a difference in this, you specifically tied it back to the Constitution and the First Amendment. So it wasn't just a general statement. This is what they can do, and this is why they can do it. Secondly, I too was impressed with your tying it in to the Electoral College, that we don't have the tie-in to, or we don't necessarily have a totally democratic process, just like the Electoral College. You're right to be skeptical about people's knowledge of the judicial branch. There is a survey that I use when I'm teaching a class, a survey done, national survey in 2010, where people were asked, who is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? The good news is over half the people, 53%, told the truth and said they didn't know. The largest group that gave a name did get Chief Justice Roberts, but what's scary is there were the people that guessed Thurgood Marshall, who had been dead for a while by the time the survey was taken, John Paul Stevens, who was still alive but was never Chief Justice, and then Harry Reid, who at the time was in the US Senate and was never on the Supreme Court. The final point I will make is you seemed to brighten up when I indicated that each of you was constitutionally qualified to be on the Supreme Court. If you can get yourself nominated to be on the federal bench before you leave Seminole, I will lobby your teacher to make sure you get an A in this class. So, so he'll report back to me. I'm sure if each one of you, if any one of you gets on the becomes a federal judge. So go for it, because I, like my colleague, would be more confident in having you than some of the other people I know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to your teacher. This has been a great experience having you here at the National Invitationals.
Yes.